Stop crying. It's not a big deal because I said so. If you don't clean that up right now, no phone for a week. If you've ever said one of these things to your kids or something like it, you're not alone. But these kinds of responses actually make kids less likely to listen and less likely to cooperate, both now and in the future. If you want a loving, trusting, close relationship with your children, as well as fewer tantrums, fewer meltdowns, and more cooperation, this is the video for you. I'm Bruce Lambert from How Communication Works. This is a channel where I teach you about communication skills so you can improve your relationships, succeed at work, and be more confident. Today, I want to talk about one of the most influential parenting books of all time, the great How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and How to Listen So Kids Will Talk by Adele, Faber, and Elaine Mazlish. It's a great title in addition to being a great book. I want to tell you about a little anecdote that reminded me about how important this book was. A few weeks ago, I was out running errands when I saw the following interaction between a parent and a child. The parents had brought the kid to a really nice candy store in my town. This is not just like a Walgreens or a drugstore or something with lots of candy. This is a store completely dedicated to huge buckets and baskets of candy. But they arrived about 9 in the morning and the store didn't open till 10. So not surprisingly, the kid had a complete meltdown when they realized that the store wasn't open. He had obviously been looking forward to it for a long time. And the way the parent responded was typical, but it broke my heart. The father just kept telling the kid, stop crying. The store will be open later. We can come back another time. You know, this is how I would have responded before I knew the techniques in this video and in this book also. The most valuable outcome I experienced with this is how these communication techniques created the foundation for a trusting and respectful relationship that lasts into my kids' adulthood. When your kids feel heard and respected, they develop a deep sense of trust in you and respect for you and admiration for you and love for you. And this becomes the basis for your influence in their life. You wonder, well, why can't I influence my teenager? You've got to start when they're very young. And then you've got to develop this kind of trusting relationship so that your opinion and your admiration really matter to them. And this is where your influence is really rooted. So here we go. 5 powerful principles from this book with clear examples of what to say and what not to say in pretty common parenting scenarios. Principle number 1, help children deal with their feelings by naming their feelings. The first principle is the most fundamental one. It's about helping kids deal with their feelings by acknowledging them. And this is the same principle I teach when I talk about how to be empathic with adults. It's really no different. We should just start with children. Just like adults, children need their feelings to be acknowledged before they can process them and move forward. But what we often do as parents is deny children's feelings. But when we deny them or dismiss them or minimize them, which are all things that we do with kids and unfortunately with adults too, they become more upset and less able to cooperate. So the key is to acknowledge these feelings. And in this book, they give 4 simple steps. First, listen with full attention. So you have to pay attention to your kid when they're upset. This is the first signal that you have to send them that you're really you can't be looking at your phone. You can't be distracted. You can't be doing something else. You have to orient towards them and listen with full attention and try to figure out what is it they're feeling. The second, acknowledge their feelings. And you could do this just with a simple word like, oh, I see. You don't have to give some complicated acknowledgement in the beginning. You just orient with full attention and acknowledge their feelings with a simple word like, oh, etc. Then you want to try to give their feelings a name. That's the third step. Give their feelings a name. And then finally, give them their wishes in a fantasy. You can't always give the kids what they want in real life, but you can give that to them in fantasy, and I'll tell you what that looks like. Let's imagine a fairly typical situation. You've got a toddler. They're trying to put together a puzzle and they're very frustrated. They've got a puzzle piece and they can't make this puzzle piece fit. So here's how a lot of us would respond if we hadn't read these books or learned these techniques. It's not that hard. You're overreacting. Just here, let me do it. Okay, so we minimize their feelings, we deny their feelings, and then we even jump in and do the thing themselves instead of trying to deal with the feeling. So what happens next? Of course, the kid gets more upset. No, I want to do it myself. And then maybe they throw the puzzle piece, maybe they push the whole puzzle off the table and they storm off to their room, or they win a tantrum, or they fall apart and begin to cry. So this is what the book, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, suggests. First, listen with full attention. So you orient to the kid, you see what's going on. In this case, it might not make that sense to say oh or because you could see what's going on and they haven't said anything to you. But then you give the feeling a name. So say something like, that puzzle looks really hard. You seem very frustrated. Those pieces can be tricky to fit together. Say it in whatever words seem natural to you, and you have to say it sincerely. You can't say any of this as if it's scripted, as if it just came from a book. You have to say it sincerely and meaningfully, like you really do love and care about your child, because they'll be able to tell if you're faking it or if it seems like it's just a technique. So that looks so hard. You seem really frustrated. It's hard to put these pieces together sometimes. Something like that, where we acknowledge what they're going through. Then the child feels understood and they say, yes, this won't go in. And then you can even continue to acknowledge it. It's really annoying when something doesn't work the way you want it to, just continuing to acknowledge. And now maybe the kid starts to feel heard. I'm going to try turning it around. Or they might even say, I'm going to try it later. I'm just frustrated. Either way, it's fine. You've acknowledged their feeling. You've let the feeling sort of be discharged. You didn't deny it. You didn't minimize it. You've signaled to the kid, I notice you. I see you. I'm in touch with you. I'm attuned to your feelings. And this is what reassures and calms the child down. So what happens? By acknowledging the feeling, this is frustrating, the kid feels understood. You didn't fix the problem. You didn't take over. You just validated the feeling in a way that made sense. This creates a space for the kid to move forward and solve the problem themselves or deal with the feeling themselves. And that's what we want to encourage anyway. And this principle applies to all feelings: disappointment, anger, fear, sadness, anxiety, etc. We can acknowledge these feelings instead of trying to deny them or minimize them. Children learn that emotions are normal and manageable. They also learn the name of the different emotions that they're feeling, and we can model for them how to respond to these emotions. There's much more to be said about each of these techniques, but I want to get through all 5 of them, so I'm going to move on now. If you're interested in this and want to learn more, I'll do a whole video about each of these techniques if you want to learn more about them. The second principle is about how to encourage cooperation without using demands, threats, or lectures, which is what I would use, which is what a lot of parents use, and of course doesn't work. So let's look at a common situation. There's toys all over the living room floor. The dreaded Lego, which will, hurt your foot so much when you step on it in bare feet. But there's just toys and junk all over the floor. Pretty common scenario for most parents. So how would we respond to this before we learn these principles? How many times do I have to tell you to pick up your toys? You never listen. You are so irresponsible, right? Maybe we're not always that harsh, but most of us can admit to saying something like this to our kids when we're frustrated. So what happens? The kid gets defensive. I was going to do it later. You're always yelling at me, and then they maybe run off, or they certainly don't cooperatively pick up the toys. If they do, this hasn't exactly established a basis for trust. This is, fear-based or intimidation-based parenting. So instead, try something like this. I see toys on the floor. I see Legos there. When Legos get left out, I can step on them and it hurts so much. And if other toys get left out, I might break them. I'm worried someone might fall or hurt themselves, or I might break one of your toys. So the response then might be, oh, I forgot about my toys. I'll pick them up now. Now, I'm simplifying. Kids are not always going to be immediately cooperative, but the principle is that instead of attacking the child's character or yelling or threatening or blaming, you can just describe what you see, provide neutral information about the consequences instead of threatening or intimidating information about the consequences, and then talk about your own feelings about the situation and see how the kid responds. You've got to have faith. I know that some of you might be accustomed to a more authoritative form of parenting. Maybe that's what you had, or maybe that's what culturally you've come to believe is the right approach, but I invite you to try this approach and see if it works. This approach asks for cooperation, and it invites cooperation rather than resistance because it preserves the kid's dignity. It gives them information they can act on rather than criticism that they have to defend against or fear that they have to cower from. There are a couple of other techniques that the authors talk about in the book in terms of how to get cooperation. Sometimes they say, use a single word, toys, or write a note. Please put away so no one trips. Signed, your toys. But the whole idea is to express your feelings without attacking their character. So something like, I feel frustrated when I have to walk around toys on the floor. Again, try it yourself, see if it works. The third principle is about alternatives to punishment that actually teach responsibility rather than resentment. All parents, including myself, have tried punishment as a way to get cooperation or compliance. It might work temporarily, but it often creates 4 problems. First, it breeds resentment. The kids do not like being punished. It doesn't seem to make sense to them. The punishment might not seem to fit the crime, etc. It teaches power over reason or logic or cooperation. That is, you are the powerful one. You have the power to impose punishments. They must simply comply. It damages trust because anytime you just exert raw power over someone rather than trying to reason with them, it undermines a relationship. And finally, punishment tends to focus children on what they can get away with rather than on doing what's right based on their own sense of what's right and wrong, which is really what we want to move towards, a kind of self-regulation. So let's think of a common situation. I've dealt with some variation on this one. Let's say your kid has drawn on the wall with crayon or maybe permanent marker, who knows? So what's the punitive approach? What is wrong with you? You know better than that. No phone for a week. Go to your room right now. So this is we get angry. They've drawn on the newly painted wall with permanent marker. It's going to cost a lot of money to fix or paint over or clean off. Maybe we won't even be able to clean it up. So we're angry. The outcome, a crying child feels misunderstood, feels frightened, feels resentful, is off running to their room. There's an alternative. You can say in a firm but respectful tone, I'm really upset to see crayon on the wall. Walls are not for drawing on. Paper is for drawing. You can help me clean this up, and then we'll find some paper we can paste up on the wall and you can draw on that. And then the child might say something like, I'm sorry, I wanted to make a big picture. Well, let's get some cleaning supplies, and after we clean this, I'll tape up a big sheet of paper on the wall for your next masterpiece. This approach expresses your feelings without attacking your character. It's okay for you to be mad. It's okay for you to be frustrated. It's okay for you to express that for your children. You can role model how to express your feelings without attacking another person and attacking the character of your child whom you love. It states your expectations clearly so they know what kind of behavior is acceptable and what kind of behavior is not acceptable in your house. It shows how you can make amends for some kind of bad behavior, in this case by helping to clean up the wall. And it offers a constructive alternative. So you're not just denying and punishing and taking away privileges. You're saying, yes, it's okay to draw. It's even okay to draw a big picture on the wall, but on paper, not on the wall itself. You focus on solutions rather than on blame. You maintain your authority. You're still the parent. You still get to make the rules in your house, but you can preserve the relationship and teach important life skills like how to express your feelings, how to make amends, and so on. The fourth principle transforms how we give praise in a way that builds self-esteem rather than dependence on external validation. And of course, I believe that self-esteem comes primarily from achievements in the world. I don't think it only comes from the way our parents talk to us and tell us, aren't you special? But it certainly doesn't hurt to show your children that you love and appreciate and admire them for their achievements. So think about how we typically would praise a child. A child maybe helps us set the table for dinner and we say, good job. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's positive, but it's vague. It is evaluative, and the kid isn't necessarily sure what was good about it or if you really noticed their effort. It's sort of non-specific. Here's an alternative. I noticed that you set the table with all the forks on the left and the knives and the spoons on the right, and you remember napkins for everyone. That really helps make dinner time so much better for everyone. Thank you. So the child's response might be something like, I remembered where everything goes. What's good about this is it helps the kids see exactly what they did well. It focuses on effort and process, not just results, which is really useful going forward when they might not always be able to get results. And we know as adults that sort of being able to give effort and focusing on the process is often more important than a focus on the results in the long run. We can't often control the results. This technique often builds internal motivation rather than a sort of dependence on approval. It gives the child a sense of pride in their own accomplishments, which is what we want to cultivate rather than dependence on our approval. And it avoids any comparisons with others, like with siblings or something like that. And remember before I said, I think self-esteem is based on accomplishments in the world primarily, not just on praise from our parents. But this approach is particularly powerful because it helps kids develop an accurate self-image based on their actual accomplishments rather than just your praise. Even when we're correcting kids' mistakes, this kind of description approach works better than evaluation. Instead of saying, your math homework is sloppy and careless, you could say something like, I see you've solved most of these problems correctly. There's two that I think might need another look. The fifth and final principle for this video is about collaborative problem solving, which teaches really important life skills while at the same time, hopefully, resolving conflicts. Let's look at probably the most common conflict in modern life between parents and children, disagreements about screen time. So the typical authoritarian approach, one that I'm sure I took at some time, turn that off now. You've been on that game too long. That thing is rotting your brain. No screens. Screens off. some variation on that. And of course, the kid says, just 5 more minutes. I'm almost done. Let me finish this game. Just this round. The show's almost over. I'm talking to Sally. Whatever. They make excuses to stay on the screen longer. And then you say, no, off now. I'm shutting it down for a week. What's the collaborative approach? Seems we have a problem. You want more time to finish your game. I'm concerned about having enough time for homework and dinner. Let's figure this out together. What ideas do you have? And the kid might say something like, well, I could do my homework right after dinner instead. Maybe I could do my homework right after dinner instead of before. You say, well, that's one possibility. What if we set a timer for 15 more minutes of game time, then move on to homework? And if there's time after dinner, you can play a little bit more. And the kid says, that could work. 15 minutes is enough to finish this level. Now, again, I'm not being idealistic. It doesn't always work perfectly. You have to try to do all these things. You have to do them for a while. And, whenever people ask me about, how did I develop such a good relationship with my children? I said, it started 25 years ago. It started with me reading to them every night before they went to bed. It's not that you can have an uncooperative, hostile relationship with your children. And then by using a couple of phrases like this, you're going to fix everything. No, this has to start early and be consistent. And of course, it has to be accompanied by all the other things we do as parents. We have to be loving. We have to be present. We have to be attentive. We have to give them a warm and safe place to live. We have to set boundaries and so on. But these kinds of approaches to common problems, I think, will work. At least in my experience, they did, and I invite you to try them. So this kind of problem-solving process has 6 steps. 1, talk about the child's feelings and needs. In this case, they want to have more screen time. Talk about your feelings and needs. Brainstorm solutions together. You can write down all the ideas, or at least enumerate all the ideas without evaluating what's a good or bad idea. Decide which suggestions to try, and then follow through on your agreement. This approach to problem solving teaches negotiation, compromise, mutual respect, skills that your kids need throughout life. It's also a foundation for solving much more serious problems that come up as the kids get older. I'm a huge believer in this book and in these techniques. They worked for me. And I can tell you, I have a great relationship with my children, but you don't have to believe me. And how do I prove it, right? There's no way I can really prove it. You can just take my word for it as an expert, or if you have come to trust me over all the videos I've shown you, I really believe it works and I encourage you to try it. But I want to acknowledge that any parenting approach reflects certain cultural values. So how to talk so kids will listen, how to listen so kids will talk, comes from a sort of middle-class Western perspective that tends to emphasize individual autonomy in children, emotional expression, and so on. Many cultures prioritize respect for authority, family harmony, emotional restraint. So you might wonder if these techniques undermine parental authority. What I found is that these principles can be adapted across cultural context. The key is to adapt these techniques in ways that align with your family's values while still building respectful communication with your children. I think there's good and bad parenting in every culture, but I definitely want to acknowledge that when you teach people how to communicate, and especially when you teach people how to parent, you are in a sense advocating for a certain set of cultural values. And I want to be sensitive to that. And I'm happy to hear from you in the comments about how these principles relate to the way you think about parenting. I've given you my personal endorsement of this book, and I think you can check on Amazon how popular the book has been for more than 30 years. So that should give you some faith in the quality of its advice. But if it's important to you, there's also research that shows that it works. There's randomized controlled trials that find that this kind of parenting promotes the kind of optimal parent-child outcomes that most of us are looking for. There are long-term studies that show this kind of autonomy-based parenting leads to better outcomes in adulthood. And it also shows that these approaches tend to build stronger parent-child bonds that last long into adulthood. And that's what most of us want. And my experience personally aligns with what the research shows. The kind of mutual respect that grows up around this communication style created a foundation of trust with my own children that's lasted into their adulthood until the present day. It seems that my kids still like to talk to me and like to spend time with me and value my opinion. They continue to value my input and guidance, not because they have to, because they're reasonably independent, but because our relationship is built on a history of respect and mutual understanding. These principles aren't scripts to memorize. They're approaches to adapt to your unique relationship, your unique child, your unique cultural circumstances, and so on. The beauty is that they can grow up with you and your child. The same principles that help you navigate the toddler years and the tantrums will help you communicate with your teenager about much more complex issues. And ultimately, they'll form the foundation for how you deal with your adult children. Remember, the goal isn't perfect parenting. That's not a goal any of us are going to achieve. It's to create a relationship where your kids feel heard and respected while still receiving receiving the guidance and boundaries that we have to provide them as their parents. This balance of connection and direction is what allows you to maintain influence in your child's life long after your authority over them has waned. I encourage you to pick up a copy of How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, How to Listen So Kids Will Talk. I'll link to it in the description. Try one principle at a time. Be patient with yourself as you practice and watch how these small changes in communication can transform your relationship with your children. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments which principle you're most excited to try or have tried, or if you've read this book, let me know how it's worked out for you. Share your own success stories using these approaches, or share your skepticism and your concerns. If you found this helpful, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time.